All right, so here we go. This is the second part, continuing on from the wet on wet multicolor bleeds that we had going on. You can see where I've added two large trees for my foreground. I used a normal pencil. You should use your 4H or whatever H pencil you have. Um, you don't really want to see the pencil very much, and you want to erase it. You can erase when the paper is dry, but once you get paint over it, the paint sort of seals it in, and you won't be able to erase very much later. So watch how that works as we go through this. You'll see that these are fairly big trees, fairly wide, because as you go back, the trees will get smaller. They will get shorter, but they will move up the page. So I've left some space up here for those trees and space in here for those trees. And you notice my two trees are a little bit different from each other to create a little bit of variety. Now, as we work into the painting, the negative painting, working around the trees, we want to have control over this. Now, you need control at the edges where it comes right up next to the tree, but we're going to use the water to bleed some more in amongst the spaces, right? So I'm going to mix some colors. We had the colors mixed earlier. I'm going to stick with the warm tones. I'm going to make sort of an orangey red here to get me started. But you'll notice that as you go back in space, maybe having it get a little bit darker and be a little bit more neutral. I'm going to add just a touch of the purple to this and sort of tone it down a little bit from the vibrant orange. There we go. A wee bit more of the orange. So it sort of looks like spilt grape juice. It's actually sort of what it looks like. And I want to do this with a light wash. So I don't want all that much color in this. Okay. And to make sure, some of you guys are having some trouble controlling your water, a paper towel right up near the base of the brush will help suck out some of the water so you have a little more control without changing the color, right? So much, just pulling out the water. Now, let's say I want to add my water. I do need a little more color on that, I guess. A little more control here right up against the edge because I want that to be the edge of my tree. But then I want to blend this into the rest of everything, right? So a little bit of control, and we want to make sure that we paint fairly quickly because you don't want these edges to harden and get dark before you're able to have it go all the way across that nice big space. Now, you can see we're only getting slightly darker here. This is a subtle process. This is a glaze, a thin color application, evenly all the way across. We'll go back in and add some more interest to it in a little bit, trust me. But for now, I'm of course hurrying because that's a good way to go. Oh my goodness. There we go. Watch your edges. And you know, don't get, watercolor has a fun fluidity to it, so don't get too caught up in how perfect it is, right? And make sure you do, whether you do it now or you do it a little bit later, you need to go in and get the spaces in between the branches, right? So that this also continues to get dark as you go. So every layer you do, not just this first one that's going in there, is going to get darker and darker in those spaces. There we go. And you can see I'm not using my tiniest brush. I probably will get the tiniest brush as we move back in space and my trees get smaller. But for now, we want to block in this area, getting it just a little bit darker. More color. Should have mixed a squidge more. And there we go. Once again, my light here is making things dry out a little bit sooner than perhaps I might want, but that's okay too. And you can see my two colors aren't exactly matching. That's all right. Not a problem. I am going to cover the whole thing though, right? Not just in around the trees, but this whole area. Like this, all the way across. I know we're getting rid of some of that really fun stuff that happened with that first layer. That's just how it works. A little more water in there. Oops, you can see I went right up into my potential tree there. And we want any places where the colors come together to really blend. So make sure you do that so you don't have like blocky, I guess that's going to be an indent. Oops, speckle, speckle. Okay, there we go. And then you can go back in and get these, again, areas between the branches. Make sure that's going to go right up to the tree. Blend, blend, blend. Okay. And if you need a smaller, I have somewhere, smaller brush. There we go. Make this. Actually, I don't want it all the way smaller yet. I gotta get it through here. Okay. And if you, as you're going, if you lift up and you realize you've left a puddle of water and a lot of color, you can see where I've done that in a couple of places, get in there and smoosh it around, pull it back out, right? Lift and feather, not a problem. If you really put a lot down, remember you can use your tissue that you have at the ready to go in and erase, right? Not a problem. Differentiate those guys from each other and from the background. Okay, that looks more or less like a tree and a tree. And you see how darker over on that side, lighter over here. I'm going to make this even out a little bit more. And maybe squish more water in there just to make that blend some. Okay, now, if we are looking at this thinking to yourself, well, okay, that's nice, but it's kind of a little bit boring as far as what's going to be on the trees in the background. Well, then go ahead and because the next layer is going to have trees too, right? We don't want those trees all the same color. So then you can go in and maybe add, right, some color while it's still wet, so it will bloom and bleed a little bit in a couple of areas. Add a little bit there. And because as it moves back in space, it's also getting darker and it's getting a little bit cooler. Perhaps as I move up the page, whoa, that was a lot of watercolor. I can add a little bit more here. And I'm going to add just a touch of blue, but I'm going to stay away from the greens because this is primarily a red and orange painting, and the green's going to make that go a little wonky and muddy the colors. So if I really want to tone down the colors and make it a little more neutral, I can have green, but the green needs to tone down my reds, right? Not be all on its own as a green. So you can see if you mix in the green with some of that red, it becomes sort of grayish. That you could use, right? Because that'll make it a little bit less vibrant. But don't use a lot of green that's just totally green. If this is your warm analogous color painting. Okay. Where are we? Oh yeah, I missed a couple spots. Take a look before you think you're done on your layer here. And make sure you've gone in and gotten all, whoops, that's too much water. That's, there you go. That's what happens. And that's what happens when you're not paying attention. Bloop, down, up. Look, I could just do it again. Take out some of the water, get in some of the color, take out some of the water, and then go try that again. Oh, much better. Look, control, what could happen? And if you have, a couple of things compositionally. If you have a set of branches instead of in front of another set of branches, add just a little bit of an outline on the back side of the front one to differentiate from the ones that are in behind, right? Just a little bit. If you feel like you want to do that a couple of times in there, to be like, yeah, all right. We're negative painting. Ooh, that's really not very good. Negative painting, but I want this to have like a couple of leafiness. You can try that. It'll look better when we're done anyway, but there we go. So that's layer 2, okay? Notice with the composition, this horizon line is not a straight line. Please don't make it a straight line. You'll see what happens with the next horizon line, right? Is going to be up here somewhere. It also is going to have some curves to it to keep it interesting, and then the trees will be here. And then the background, the trees will be here, right? We'll go up, make sure I've got enough space to go up 3 levels. We'll have the next layer momentarily. My last setup, the computer was a little too close to my painting for you to actually see everything I was doing, which is unfortunate. But I think you got the gist of it. And we'll see how that goes on this one so you can actually see everything. First, and I will raise this up so hopefully you can see it with some light. I have added my next layer of trees, right? So I've got 2 slightly smaller trees in the middle ground there, literally in the middle between the other 2 trees. And I've got one that has some branches and one that has some branches and leaves, poofy things, again, similar. And you'll notice my horizon line here on this level also has some curvy bits, trying to keep things interesting, right? And you can also see how, there we go, maybe a little better, as this second coat of paint dried, it got darker, right? It got significantly darker. So let's see what we can do on this next one as we go along. The other thing that I would say, and I don't have a lovely white eraser handy, so we're going to go with what's on the pencil. Go in and erase what you can from that first set of outlines so that you don't carry too many of them over into the next layer of paint. And you'll see that the ones that got the paint over the pencil doesn't come off very much. It comes off a little, but not much. Depends on how much paint you put over them. Which might mean that you have rough sketches that you paint outside of, so you can get rid of the pencil marks, or it might mean that you just get used to the idea you're going to have pencil marks, and that's fine. If you start with your 4H, you won't notice them as much as you would with the 2, what have I got? HB pencil that I've got, and am using, whoops, if I wiggle this, the whole thing moves. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of a little bit of that. And there we go. Okay, so next layer. This is looking really red and really purple, and I kind of want to tone it down some. So over in my color palette here, yes, we're going to start, and I'm going to use the same stuff I had before, right? I'm going to mix a little bit more of it this time, so I can be a little more consistent and thoughtful about the colors I'm using. A little more water. Whoops. See, my bad. And I am going to go in and use a little bit of the green and the blue, but not as colors by themselves, but merely as ways to make my reds, orange, and purples a little less colorful. Because I want to get the feel of, you know, it's like a sunsetty forest scene kind of thing, but I definitely want it to be a little less day-glow color. Ooh, that's a lot of green. You see, it doesn't take much to tone that down, so I'm getting more of a brown here this time. What happens if I put a little bit of blue in there? Like that. Ooh, that got really blue really fast. Back to the red. There we go. More of a maroon. I think we can live with that. Okay. Now, this color is going... I'm going to start over here on the edge. Tell me if I don't like it. I won't notice so much. Well, that's not so bad, right? And again, you want to make sure your edges are flowing, but that you stop right at the edge of both the first tree and the second tree when you get there. Right, okay. Oops. Ideally, you stop at the edge. Control there, not a bad thing. Make sure you get in between so you're not trying to match that color later. And the little ones, when you're using a big brush like this, you have to watch out for those little like droplets that happen because you've got a pretty wet brush that you're working with. And it just leaves a whole bunch of water and color all at once. You may not want that. All right, you see how this color's toning down just a little bit. Maybe not enough. Maybe I want a little more blue in there. Just a squidge. There we go. Oh, nice. Okay, so here I am, second layer of trees. Similar deal. Try to control that line of color at the edge, both of the tree, right, and at the horizon line. And of course I decided I needed to have a dead tree because, well, wanted to do, whoops, something that didn't look quite so much like the other ones. I'm doing sort of the quickie versions of trees. We'll try some evergreens and whatnot on our cool tone one, maybe. Might be an interesting thing. All right, make sure you get all those little bits and bobs in between everything. There you go. And up here. And again, you can see where if you stop part way and you don't keep, what did I do? Don't keep continuing, you're going to get some slightly darker lines where the color doesn't necessarily blend in where you want it to. Okay. That, a little bit of that. I'm going to make sure I get these colors over here to match. It looks like I'm going to have to go in and maybe mix a little bit more anyway, so let's see how that goes. A couple branches in here. And make sure your branches, okay, so here's the thing about branches, which we haven't really talked about now that I'm partway into this whole composition thing. Branches get narrower as they go up, right? Theoretically, you know this. So make sure that happens. You don't want them to stay all the same width all the way up. You don't want them too much thicker near the top than they are. They might be sort of lower down. So kind of make sure you're paying attention to that. Also, they tend to branch out and up. Trees tend to grow towards the light. Generally, that's up. Unless they have other forces acting on them, which generally these are trees in the wild, so they do not. Okay, a little bit of no idea what I was doing in there, but there's some branches and some leaves and who knows. Make sure these are dark enough back here. So that looks like we're seeing through. And remember what I said, if you've got some leaves in front of leaves, right, you may want to do a little bit of this kind of thing to differentiate just a squidge. There we go. So that's the third layer of color. And again, it's pretty uniform. So there might be places where we're going to go in and add a lot more of this blue here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit darker up here at the top, since my trees aren't necessarily, my next layer of trees aren't necessarily going to get that far anyway. And then if I wanted some more purple, wow, that's purple, okay. There we go, a nice bluey purple in there. Let's see what happens with, I need another brush. Here's another brush. And of course my water is a disaster here, it's not exactly clean. But I want to add a few little things going on here, but I want to make sure that it bleeds, so I'm going to put down a little more water. Again, being careful that it's bleeding up to, but not into the parts I left without for the other trees, right? So then we can go in and you can just wait, or you can kind of dab it around a little bit with some more water in case you're not sure that's going to work exactly the way you think it is. You can let it bleed on its own. And it should bleed out towards the dry edge, right? As long as there's enough water, it'll be interesting. Ah, there we go. And we'll put some more over here, kind of like that. But you can see how, like, yes, this is purple and green over here, but it's not reading as green on the page, right? So. There we go. I kind of want a little bit of, I want some more yellow up in here too. Okay, not so bad. Maybe. It's starting to look too light to me. That'll have another color, another layer on it anyway. And again, if you're like, that got a little dark, just go blot some of it up. So tissues are for. All right, we're making a happy mess. Yeah, I can live with a happy mess. This is the thing, right? I always go back in and then on one two-step too far. Who knows? I want to see those branches a little more clearly. And it will dry a little bit darker as it goes here, but still. There we go. Okay. So now, once again, we wait for it to dry entirely. And then we'll come back with trees number 3 and paint color number 4, and we'll be done. And we will see all of the layers as they go back in space. More in a moment. Okay, so last round of color, and it's going to get darker, and I'm going to pay more attention to my edges, and I'm going to use a smaller brush this time. So I have a little tree here at the back. That's my 3rd layer, and I have 1 here. Now I've done 2 and 2 and 2. Not the best recommendation for composition. I should probably have spaced it out a little bit differently and given myself another chance. I suppose I could put another little tree back in here somewhere, but then it's going to feel a little crowded. So you decide what that means for you. To get darker, I'm going to go darker. I'm going to go a little bit bluer. Now, one of the things about glazing, and you found this on your technique grid, right? You put down one color and you put another color over it, and where they mix, it's not as strong version of the second color. So I can be fairly blue or fairly green with my next layer and not have it actually look all that funky or brightly different. Now I'm going to not do a straight green, of course. I'm going to mix it with some purple. And I'm going to put a little bit of that red in there. Now, I'm also, you can see I'm not taking the time to clean my brush as much as I should between dips into the paint palette. You may want to clean your paint palette a little bit better between getting your brush loaded up from one color to the next. I'm sort of cleaning it out as I go here, but pay attention to that, yeah? There we go. All right, that's still fairly purple. I think I want it a little bit browner than that. Okay. Ooh, nice gray, actually. That's not too bad. So I'm going to, oh, and I already, the part that you guys didn't see was that I already erased some of the pencil lines, right, from the second one. So make sure you do that before you paint each layer. And again, even though I'm being really careful with a smaller brush, I'm also taking time as I go to blend in those edges. I did manage to get some clean water. I don't need too much water involved in this time, but I do want to make sure, because you can see last time where I didn't bring the wet part right up to the edge of the tree, I got some of this weird stuff going on, and I'm not super excited about that. All right. Now, again, smaller brush, paying a little bit more attention to my edges. This is going to take me a little bit longer, so what I will probably do is speed up and go through this, because you know the drill by now. And you can also, the one thing I would say is that if you're like, oh, okay, I want that to be separated from here a little bit better, now's the time. It won't look exactly like, because I don't have the darker reds under there, but you could like soften that a little bit. You can blend things a little bit. Okay, I will speed this up so you don't have to take quite so long watching me. Okay. So there we have 3 layers, right? Foreground, super light. Middle ground, got a little dark a little fast, probably. So that meant that my third layer with the two trees, here and here, are a little bit dark still. And this will, the background will be a little bit darker when it dries, but it's maybe a little bit difficult to see that third layers of trees. So you could decide to either go a little bit darker or a little bit bluer in the background. See what happens if we do that up near the top. And you wouldn't have to bring it necessarily all the way down. You could bring a little more tone in if you wanted to, or you could, oh yeah, that's grounding it a little bit. You can also put that blue down in here along the bottom and blend that up a little bit. Just make sure it does blend and isn't a solid line like this is starting to look. Blend that up in there. And up in here with just a little bit of water. And not a lot. Remember what happened the last time we had a whole lot of water that didn't come right up to the edge of the trees. Got a little funky. So make sure that that blends right up to the edge. Maybe a little bit more blue down in here. This, I think, is where things got a little lost. This little section in here. Maybe think about each discrete section so it's easier to have it go right up to the edge of the tree. Okay. Little by little by little. Ta-da. This is what we're looking for. All right, doesn't have to be genius trees, doesn't need every single leaf, doesn't need every single branch. But let's get the sense of lighter to progressively darker, using one color palette for your, for one, and a very different color palette for the other one, and the fact that your blues and complementary colors, so the complementary in case of the reds is the green, will make it darker and more neutral as you get towards the back. So that's the plan. Remember to put your work in your blog so that I can see it and comment on it, and your peers can comment on it too. And do that for every step, every layer. And for, say I finished this one, I haven't done my other one, I'm going to go post this one, if I were you, and then post the second one when I get it done. Don't wait for both to be done before you start making these posts, right? Every 48 hours, I want to see something that says, oh, look, I'm making progress in Fine Arts 1. Yay! Okay. That's it for now. Let's see how you do.